Your host, Myke Macapinlac, and I'm excited that you're here. If you're technically skilled like an engineer, programmer, or a developer, and you're tired of struggling socially, go to socialconfidencemastery.com to get more valuable resources to improve your social confidence and to learn more about our social skills coaching program. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hey guys, today I have a special guest on the podcast. We have Bill Ranshaw, who's a porn recovery expert. Bill, thank you so much for making time to be on my podcast.
Myke, I appreciate it. It's an honor. I've been following you on YouTube for some time, and I wish you were around about 20, 25 years ago. Everything that you practice and you preach and that you teach, it took me probably 30 years to learn, and if I followed what you had, it probably would have taken me, a month or two to implement.
Well, I definitely wish I knew what I knew. I definitely wish I knew what I know now when I was 20 as well. So yeah, that goes for both of us.
Absolutely. And my conversation as well. So hopefully I can impart some wisdom of my experience, and it's my experience only where my wisdom comes from.
That's awesome. So Bill, this is a very serious topic, and I'm so glad that you're, choosing to take the lead and talk about this very sensitive topic, and I'm so glad that, you're the one bringing more awareness to this. So for everyone here who's not familiar with the work that you do, real quick, just tell us your story and how did you get started into it?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I just want to get off the table right now is it is a tough subject, or most people think of it as a tough subject. I am going to just rip the Band-Aid off right now and say there's going to be some words that I'm going to use that make a lot of people cringe. The first one is masturbation. Mm-hmm. The other one is orgasm.
Sure.
So I will say it again: masturbation, orgasm. Masturbation, Great. Orgasm. We'll say it until we're all comfortable with it and you joke about it. But from talking to a lot of people, usually I'll say that and then they cringe hearing those words and they don't hear what comes next.
Yeah.
But my story relates to back in I would say I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I'm a little bit older probably than a lot of the people that you work with, but I'm 48 years old, and my life started off here in Denver I was introduced to porn in a way that most people weren't probably back in the 80s. My dad had bought one of those big giant satellite dishes. I'm not sure if you're ever familiar with those that go out in your backyard. And so we had access to porn when I was about 11 years old, which was a little advanced for that time frame back then. Most people were maybe getting magazines and things like that their parents had. But I had hardcore porn at 11. And again, started watching it every time the parents would leave the house. Whenever I had an opportunity, you had to be a little bit more careful then because it was on every TV. If you turned to the satellite channel, you could see what was going on in another room. So you had to be a little bit more sneaky about it.
Yeah.
But definitely the access for me was higher than what most people were, but compared to today's rates, and that's kind of where I've kind of wanted to reach out and just share my experience in the world, because kids today and younger men are being exposed to porn at such an alarming rate, intensity, frequency, and on demand. And so I'll kind of walk through my story of what had happened. And so I grew up, this is why I love your channel so much, Myke, because I am or would have been the perfect demographic for your channel. I grew up and I was afraid of my own shadow. I was so shy, so shy. People would come over to the house. I would hide behind furniture. And to top it off, my sister, who was only 11 months older than I am, was extremely outgoing. And so she was the antithesis of it. We were complete opposites in that. So she got all the attention. She always talked. She was always the center of attention. And she also had a lot of girlfriends that were running around growing up. So here I am, the shy kid, always falling in the friend zone. That was my high school years. And so I'll jump forward a little bit. I started porn at 11, and that kind of became my staple. And I did not have sex for the first time until I was 19. It was on my Christmas break I was in Denver, went to Arizona State, and came back for Christmas break, went out to a bar with a bunch of friends, came back. It was with some stranger we met at the bar. Everybody was kind of drunk maybe. I didn't really drink. I've never been a big drinker, but had some friends passed out on the floor, and this girl was sloshed. And here we are rolling around on some big giant, I don't know, Papillon chair, and those big round chairs with cushions in them. And it was just awkward. And that was my first time. And the first time I had sex, and I talk about this in some of my videos, that I did not orgasm the first time I had sex. And, looking back, a lot of people, and I tell the story, they said, well, that's pretty common. First times are awkward. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it is. Maybe that was just a first time. Well, it turned out that it wasn't a fluke. That followed me through every sexual experience for the rest of my life up until about 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was not able to orgasm through sex. And I joke around. I say I can count on one hand how many times I orgasmed by sex up until I was about 46 years old.
Wow.
And it led to another phenomenon, which I can kind of go in, which fits in a lot about what you talk about, is growing up really shy. And I moved to college, went to Arizona State. This was again, a time where there was really not a lot of internet. There was no internet actually when I first started. And I started to work out, started to gain some confidence. And I still had, the fear of rejection was just unfathomable. And we can all relate to that. I think anybody that listens to your podcast can relate. And even, introverts, extroverts, the fear of rejection is really big. And I was in a dorm with a friend that I had gone to high school with, this girl, and she became a close friend of mine down there. Of course, I had a giant crush on her, just like I had a giant crush on every girl in high school. And we got to be good friends, and she would always tell me about her boyfriend, like what an a-hole he was, and I knew him. And he seemed okay, but I was always up in her dorm room. She'd have the shirt off. We're listening to music. She's laying down. I'm giving her back rubs, and I'm like, okay, here I am. I'm the nice guy. Us guys are here, but I always fallen into the friend zone. 100%, 1,000% friend zone. I could never get out of it, ever, ever, ever. One time, her boyfriend invited me out. I guess I won't give his name. And he said, hey, why don't you come out with us one night? We went out, and I was expecting to just be, expect him to be a real jerk and real ass, and he was really cool. And he said, hey, I really appreciate you hanging out. I won't use her name, but I really appreciate you hanging out with her all the time. She really likes you. I know you guys went to high school together, and she, I'm busy here with activities and work and school. He was really cool. And is what I found at that time, and for better or for worse, is he treated her with indifference. And so I really picked up on that. And once I started treating girls with indifference, I fell out of that friend zone. And it also became a defense mechanism to also not be vulnerable. So that was the first lesson I learned. But at least it worked. And so I started, I was working out. I'd be indifferent. I'd talk to a girl, but I wasn't waiting by the phone all the time for them. Hey, if you want to meet up. Great. If not, no big deal. So, basically kind of stood my ground.
Yeah.
But it turned into a world from there. And I think, I might have mentioned in another conversation with you offline, but I also taught myself country dance lessons. Again, being so shy in Arizona, it was a time where it was really big and popular. I spent 7 nights a week just practicing in front of a mirror and taught myself country dance. I was going to the country bars. And so all I had to do was dance with one girl, and I had a couple friends. And as soon as I got off the floor, I would have girls lining up wanting to dance with me. And I will tell you, Myke, that was so much work that I put in just to have girls approach me and talk to me. Again, I go back to I wish I would have had your skills back.
Totally.
But I became a master. So I had girls that are approaching me. But again, going back to the point of being so fearful, I kind of developed a routine around sex where I would be kind of direct about it, but I would never put vulnerability into it. And so my life went from porn into a kind of a life of being a sex addict as well. So I teach a lot of guys, or speak to a lot of guys around both, how they kind of go hand in hand, no pun intended. And the challenge was I would watch porn, but then I would always be aroused by tons and tons of women. And so I'd go out and have all these crazy sexual experiences. And I've had so many experiences, Myke, that most people fantasize about that I might have forgotten about. And that's not a brag. It just is what it is. And I understand that the detriment that it has played into my life.
Which is what?
It really came into intimacy. So the first time where I decided to open myself up, we're going to jump forward quite a bit here. This was probably, about maybe 2013. I met a girl. She was 10 years older than I. It was on on a vacation in San Diego. It was long distance. I met this girl, beautiful Asian, just sexy as could be. And I never had a problem with hookups per se. So I could always have sex. I could bang and bang and bang and bang, but I was never able to orgasm, as I mentioned. So afterwards, if I was a girl, I'd always have to roll over and finish myself off. Well, this was a girl where the first time in my life I actually fell in love. And it really set in then. And I had noticed some of these pieces ahead of time. I started maybe having some, erectile dysfunction and some issues getting it up at times if it was somebody I really liked and got to know. But this is the first time I completely fell in love. And I just lost, complete erectile dysfunction set in. ED, I couldn't get it up. And in fact, the more in love I fell with her, the more foreign sex seemed, and sexual arousal just left. It completely left me the more and more I fell in love. And that was the first time in my life where I realized something's going on here and I got to figure this out because I've just had this crazy life and now I can't be with somebody that I want to be with. And then I had a friend reach out to me and he was really successful. And he asked me, he said, do you happen to watch porn? I said, yeah, I do, no more or less than any other guy. He says, research that, could be a bit of the problem. And that opened the door for me. That was around 2013, where I started really learning the science behind it. And for me, once I found out the detriment and what it was doing to me, I stopped immediately. It was actually March 21st, 2017. So it's just been over 3 years since I stopped watching porn and masturbating. Wow. And it was the easiest decision I ever made. I know a lot of people, it's a little bit more challenging. So when I have conversations, I really redirect it from porn addiction because a lot of people muster up some idea of a porn addict, sitting in their basement, 8 hours a day. Not to say that this doesn't happen to people, but I really try to approach and find people who are casual porn users that think, hey, it's not that big of a deal. I use it, because I'm single and I can. But the second they get into an intimate relationship, they're going to start seeing problems that they've never imagined or realized before. And
what were some of those detriments that you mentioned a few moments ago that made you quit, porn for 3 years now?
Yeah. So the first one obviously was just erectile dysfunction. Was if I'm going to be in a relationship with a girl that I want to have an amazing intimate relationship and loving relationship, I want to be able to have sex because I couldn't. It proved itself twice in 2 occasions with women that I couldn't. And so that's when I decided I need to get over this. And so if you go to my YouTube channel, I've got some videos in some of my playlists where you can see, but there was a TED Talk where it talked about the brain science behind it. And is what the eye-opening is they said that you would have to stop porn, and it could take anywhere from 6 months to a year they call it neuroplasticity, and for that to kind of rewire in your brain. Yeah. I stopped porn, never looked back, was never tempted, but it took a year and a half for me to be able to orgasm from sex. Wow. The good news was I was able to orgasm from sex. There was a couple girls that I knew. I'd moved back to Denver and I started hooking up here and there. And for the first time in my life, Mike, I was firing off rounds left and right. And into probably a dismay of one person, it was probably, too fast. But I'm doing a happy dance.
Yeah, no kidding. For
I've
sure.
never been able to do this. So I thought, great, I've been cured. Thought, wow, this is fantastic. I'm ready to enter the dating world. Yeah. And so I ended up dating, and I had met a girl 3 or 4 years ago off of Tinder. She was fantastic. We went out a few times, and it wasn't a connection then. But just last August, she and I reconnected on Tinder. I paid the $2 for the super swipe to reconnect with her. And I'll shorten that story real quick. That we actually got engaged in March. So wow. She's turned out to be the woman of my dreams. She's absolutely fascinating. She's amazing. She's beautiful. She's everything.
Amazing.
Yes. So
she's your super swipe sweetheart.
That's a great term. It absolutely is. So I'm going to do a whole nother, series of videos sometime on dating sites. I think that they can be evil at times. They can rewire the brain. Yeah. But since our time is short, I we started dating and fell in love. The good news is she was very understanding, extremely transparent. I was vulnerable. And I talk to a lot of people and I say vulnerability is the deepest level that we can connect with people. But you want to be vulnerable from a stance of confidence and not be vulnerable from a stance of being a victim, because there's kind of a difference there. And if you can be vulnerable and yet confident, that's where as a man, you can really gain connection with women. And she's amazing in that aspect. But I will say, Myke, even getting into this relationship, it's still a challenge for me. It's 3 years later. I've learned a lot of tools. I've made a lot of progress. But all the research that I found, it can take years sometimes for the neuroplasticity to kind of retrain itself. And we can kind of go into that as well.
Yeah,
what's happening.
That'd be great for sure. Can you just speak more about, like, because I don't think, like, especially that, like you've mentioned some people just watch porn casually, right? I think it would be really beneficial if you dive in a little bit deeper to the negative effects of porn, even if you just do it casually, like how does it affect you both mentally, sexually? I know you've kind of like, dabbled into it, but if you can go in greater detail, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, because it affected all aspects of my life.
Yeah.
And for people that are listening to this, they can also take in, because it's very closely related to gaming and online gaming or anything, because a lot of people become game addicts as well. And so the brain chemistry is kind of similar around all of this. So if maybe you don't think you're a porn addict, but you play a lot of video games, a lot of it works similar. And it's a lot of brain fog. And this happens with pretty much any addiction that's out there. But for me, the brain fog was it really affected all of my relationships, Myke, because it kept that level of connection away. And when I talk about I'll get into the brain chemistry in a moment here around it. But once I stopped porn, that was the first thing I noticed right away. Everything else in life started becoming a hell of a lot more enjoyable. A lot more enjoyable. I mean, just smells, you name it, just everything. Going out, going out to a dinner, just walking around, taking the dog for a walk, everything just became more enjoyable.
Why was that?
And well, what's happening in the brain and what porn does is it's all around dopamine, and this is probably nothing new for a lot of people. But dopamine is the drug that is released right before sex that says, I have to have this. I 100% have to have it. That's part of the, our reaction is, of just all of our years of being in our system. And it's designed for us, sexually for procreation. And I don't get into any spiritual aspects around this, but just chemistry for our body, we were designed to procreate, so they made it pleasurable. Yeah. Well, what porn does, so think about, all the cues, and this is neuroplasticity, and I know I might jump around here a little bit, but I'll back up to when I was young. Most people, for how the natural transition or transpiration of attraction goes, is you have neuroplasticity, which means you have all these cues and these sensitivities as you're growing up. Whether it could be touch, you could see an attractive woman, maybe some girl whispers in your ear. It could be kissing. It could be anything that you start associating arousal to, and those are all natural. And that generally happens as you grow. Well, as what porn does, it starts rewiring those cues in your system. And when you're young, it's harder to see because you can still have both of them. You can still get aroused when you see women. You can still, be touched and all those kind of things. But if you're single and you're maybe not hooking up a lot, or if you're not having sex a lot and you're using porn quite a bit, those cues wash up and they just dry up. And so for me, all of those years where the cues of what normal attraction to women would be just never got connected into my brain. And therefore, when I get into an intimate relationship, so what kind of relationships did I have that were that way? It was relationships maybe with my friends, with my mom, with my sister. And so that's how an intimate relationship would develop for me. Once I got into it, sex didn't seem right. It seemed like it didn't belong because the only cues I had for intimacy was around family and friends. And so it felt weird to have sex with somebody I liked. Like, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't belong. However, I was trained to be like, if I was alone, if I came home from work, if I sat down at my desk, all of a sudden I'm starting to get aroused. and or maybe I'd get a text message from a hookup or something. So those were all the cues that had been rewired in my brain. The same thing could be happening for gaming or anything, but all of a sudden you flip open your laptop. That's a cue. You turn on a TV. That's a cue that your brain had been wired to for porn. So all of a sudden now you start getting this drive. That's dopamine that starts flowing through your body that says, I need to have this. I have to have this now. And it's fascinating because the previous cues that people would have, think of a dopamine coming out of a faucet. Okay, that's maybe the level of dopamine on a medium level coming out of a faucet. Well, porn is a raging river of dopamine.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, that level of dopamine dwarfs any other type of dopamine that you're receiving through your body at any time. And that's why things became more pleasurable after, because it just dwarfs it. It's like the sun. You see no other levels of dopamine or activities that are exciting because you have this flood that is coming at you. And so that was the one thing that happened when I stopped. That started to dissipate. And so all the other levels of anything in the world that became exciting, I started to notice that, and that dopamine started hitting my receptors.
That's amazing. So, Bill, I'd love to know your recovery process. Like, how were you able to, quit porn and not, like, watch porn and masturbate for as long as you have now? And as you're, talking about your recovery process, if you can give some tips as well for the listeners to help them do the same, that would be awesome.
Yep. Yeah. The first thing that for me was what I wanted to gain, the pleasure of that had to be greater than the pleasure of what I had currently with the porn. And so the pain of not stopping had to be greater than the pleasure that I wanted down the road. And so you really kind of have to associate those together. It's like, what is it worth to you? And after that, again, it was a lot easier for me, but I have worked with a lot of people in working with them who might be a little bit more, quote, addicted to it. And it really is changing your routine. And I start with, before I say stop watching porn, I work with them to change their routine and set systems in place as well. Normally starting off first thing in the morning, you get a wake up routine. Whatever you can do to kind of keep that routine that is different than what you used to have. And it begins with diet, it could be exercise, whatever it might be, but start filling your day full of different routines that you were used to. So that would be the primary one, and the second one is start engaging with other people, because that was the other thing that I lost probably around energy around so many other things, because I'll back up a second. All that dopamine flushed to the brain so much through the porn, it's taxing on the body, and even though you're not physically out working out, it still is an energy drain. Because of that much dopamine that's flowing through your body. So I gained a lot of energy back. That was another thing is wow, I had a lot more energy. And so connecting with people is the first one, or is the second one after setting a routine. You want to start finding ways that you can be of service to others. And I talk about in a lot of my speeches, the first thing you can start doing is really practicing gratitude. I know that sounds funny, that like, how is gratitude going to stop me from watching porn? But it's one thing that kind of scratches the record player, where you can really be cognizant of how are you, not just the things are you grateful for, which is gratitude 101, but really going out to stores or being anywhere and thanking people, letting people know that they are appreciated, that their time on this earth is valued, and that you just really value someone else. That way you can start rebuilding that connection in that intimacy with people. And then the last one that I talk about that most people don't know around gratitude, or that they kind of forget, is how do you receive gratitude yourself? And a lot of people are great at thanking other people and being appreciative of what they have. But if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I really appreciate you doing that for me," or great shirt or something like that, you say, this old thing. If you brush off gratitude that somebody is giving you, that's robbing somebody else of giving that to you. and really be open and receptive to it. And that really builds into your confidence in your being of who you are as well, because that's what kind of really starts shutting down that imposter syndrome. Again, we could go on hours and hours on self-improvement and those type of things. But gratitude is really the baseline that you want to start to kind of start scratching that brain, because it builds that connectivity with other people. So systems and routines is one, gratitude is next, and then really start working on yourself. That would be the thing, is self-improvement, which I go into a lot of, in my programs on that.
Gotcha. So what about, tactical stuff? Like, for example, like I know you've mentioned this in some of your videos, like not bringing your phone to the bathroom, or like using website blockers, that kind of stuff. Like, did those help you, or like, and if so, like what's the best way to incorporate those techniques into porn recovery?
Absolutely. And it's tough as single guys. I mean, I get it. For people who are listening to this, it's tough. The first thing you want to do is also, if you have a desk, or if you've got a place where you normally watch porn, or where you keep your laptop, back in the old days, it was your computer. That was easy enough because you could just relocate your computer. But when laptops are so easy, you want to relocate where you do your work, or wherever you have that trigger. And again, those are those cues I were talking about, triggers. Wherever you feel, jot down when you notice those moments coming on where you need to watch porn. What was it? What was the trigger? Was it walking into the room? Was it you switching on the lights? Was it you seeing your laptop? Whatever it is. And then start rewiring that routine. And the second you see it, acknowledge it. That's the first one, is just acknowledge it. And then maybe move your laptop, go to a TV, call a friend. And that's a piece that I should probably touch on a little bit more, is this really is something that is not to be ashamed to talk about, because every guy does it. If you don't, you're probably lying to yourself or lying to everybody else. But find yourself an accountability partner. Reach out to a friend and say, hey, I think this is affecting me in my life. And usually it's maybe not a family member, but finally a good friend. And find somebody, and that's kind of the network that I'm building in my programs, is a network of men that you can have accountability partners, where you can just shoot out a text. And we joke about this, Mike. It's fantastic. My buddies and I, we talk about where, if you've got a friend that's an alcoholic, you can walk into the room and see he's drinking and say, hey, I want to have an intervention on this. If you walk into a house and your buddy's, playing with himself, I'm going to let him finish this one off. We joke about it. It's something that is such an alone thing that you do, that is not recognizable. It's free, and all these type of things. So find an accountability partner. That's very tactical, and let them know, hey, I've got this issue. I might shoot a text to you and make a joke about it. And sometimes I've done this with my buddies. I've got a friend of mine who's currently he wants to go 60 days without it. And basically, I just have a conversation with him every couple of days. I'm like, if you think about it, you think of me. Think of me in your face. Think of me of making funny faces. Think of me doing something, and to kind of have that association to scratch that record of you wanting to do it, because it's almost embarrassing. You're not gonna want to watch porn if you're thinking about your buddy jumping around in your face. So that would be one of them as well. But the cues that you talked about is usually for more kids. But rearrange your home space, whatever it might be, to just completely change any of the old triggers that you've had in the past.
Yeah. I love that. One thing that I want to add to everything that you've mentioned is, to really ask yourself what need you're trying to fill with this activity, right? Like, for example, let's say it's connection, so I love your tip earlier of, actually going out of your way to be thankful for people, like really feel that sense of connection. Because I think if you're able to get your needs met in a different way, like I'm no expert, but, I have a feeling that, like you're gonna find, once you find an alternative, right, to getting your needs met, then this activity that you do that's harmful for you, like there's a higher chance of you quitting it because you've been able to get your needs met in another way that's more healthy. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. That is 100% it. And just know that it's gonna be tough. It's going to be tough, just like anything else. And a lot of other addictions. I chat with a lot of other people around alcohol addictions and drug addictions. The one thing I didn't talk about that I want to briefly, as long as we got a little bit of time, is once I stopped porn. Again, I wish I could say life was all rosy, even though I never really considered myself a porn addict. I was a heavy porn user, and once I understood the behavior, I was able to stop. I think that's kind of the difference between an addict and not, is you're able to stop the second you realize it.
Yeah.
But for the first time in my life, Mike, I had two addictions actually slip into my life. One was opioids. After a car accident, I was put on opioids for a shoulder surgery that I had back to back. That was a chemical addiction that I had that was very hard to get off of. But after that, actually, for the first time in my life, I actually started using cocaine, and that became an addiction. And again, I realized, what is it? It was something that was really filling that place and that spot in my gut that had been taken up for porn for so many years. And so be cognizant. If you quit, other addictions are going to try to jump in and sneak in there. And you just have to be strong and really understand the brain chemistry. And I'm going to be teaching a lot about that. Again, people can go to my YouTube. I'll be doing a lot more stories on that. But if you can understand the brain chemistry of what it's doing, then it really makes it easier to understand what to stay away from. And know that you have to introduce, as you mentioned, other things that are going to fulfill that. It could be walking your dog. It could be speaking with your girlfriend. It could be going anywhere, out to dinner. Sports, working out is a big one that's going to kind of fill those endorphins.
Or developing your social skills so you can actually go out and connect with people, right? So,
But Mike, I'm so glad you said that, because that is, if you were committed to it, and for the people that listen to your podcast and your YouTube, that's exactly what it's going to do. You are now going to be motivated to actually go out and speak to somebody.
Yeah.
And I thank you for touching that, because that was probably the biggest piece I missed. Is absolutely, you get that motivation to actually interact with somebody. Because when you're watching porn, you fire off around, you're done. I don't need to go out. I'll just throw on the video game, or you just don't need to go out again. But if you can be religious to it, you will find that motivation to be social, and you'll have confidence around it too. It really is a different brain chemical as well, where you'll have that confidence. So that absolutely helps. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I love that. Bill, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your vulnerability. You've given so many amazing advice for people here who wants to find out more about the content that you produce and your programs. What's the best way for them to keep in touch with you?
Well, a couple ways. One, I am actually looking for people who are considering, if you go to pornkillssex.org, I'm looking for people to help me round out my program. And again, you don't have to be an addict, but if you're using porn, so pornkillssex.org. Also, look up my name on YouTube, Bill Ranshaw, Ranshaw. You can also look at bewilderment. That is kind of the phrase that I use. But look at my name on YouTube or Google it, and you'll find me.
Awesome. Bill, thanks again for making time. I appreciate everything that you've shared in this episode. I'm sure our listeners got a lot of value from this conversation. And I look forward to keeping in touch.
Excellent, Mike. You're a true inspiration. I appreciate it, buddy.
I appreciate it. You too. See you, Bill.
All right. Bye.
I hope you got a lot of value from that interview. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a review on iTunes to help the show reach more people. And feel free to share this episode with someone who you know who could benefit from it. That's it for me for now, and I'll talk to you very soon.